many bad people in our world. There are dictators and tyrants. But I challenge that these are the few. The most dangerous among us, however, is ordinary men and women who obey and comply without question. There are thousands who are in the opinion opposed to slavery and war, said David Thoreau, who yet in effect do nothing to put an end to them. Most people claim to be children of Washington and Franklin and Jefferson, and yet they sit on their hands with their hands in their pockets, and they say that they know not what to do and do nothing. I ask, is a successful society dependent on the obedience of the state? Is going to the polls the only recourse we have to show our contempt for the Republicrats? Our leaders require a blind disobedience from the population, which has been enforced by our education system, to which then is given credibility by the mainstream media. See, disobedience, guys, it's not the problem. The fall of our great nation can be tied directly to obedience. Take a look at the modern societies like Nazi Germany, China, and the Soviet Union, and this is just to name a few. See, it was not disobedience that led hundreds of millions of people to their deaths. It was obedience of a population consumed with fear. How did millions of Jews and Gypsies voluntarily walk into the concentration camps? Why didn't they stand up before it got that far? See, these people just simply accepted the laws and the rules of their masters because it was just mildly worse than the last rule. Right? The death of 1,000 cuts could be used to explain why people allow these types of atrocities. The people in control have taken note of this precedence. I promise you that. And by keeping us in a constant state of fear, we are less likely to stand up and say something or do something. Guys, just look at the headlines. Read any of them, right? Constant fear. These types of laws, should obviously be disobeyed. But this proves more and more difficult as we transcend into this full-blown totalitarianism. The primary goal of totalitarianism is just to enslave its people. And this begins with the mind. We hear constant talk of fake media and how one side spins the truth. I mean, talk about the ultimate newspeak, right? See, this propaganda has been preparing our minds for many years, guys. Physical enslavement then begins with mass surveillance. But this doesn't apply to you, right? Don't worry. That camera that sits on top of that stoplight, or at every corner of every building, in every store that you go walk into, it is for your protection. Move along. Soon after, the police state will begin to look like a military. This isn't happening, right? And the judicial branch's only job then becomes to keep you in a constant state of submission. Once they have our minds, and once they have this mass surveillance state, and once they militarize the police and the judicial system, then stepping out of line and being a free thinker will be dealt with a term called terrorist, and the price will be death. Here's the good news, right? It actually gets worse. See, now that the state controls everything, and our economy will continue to grind to a halt. And this will absolutely lead to shortages. Aren't you glad we haven't seen any shortages, right? I think I'll go make an egg sandwich. Anyway, let me ask you this. If you have to choose between fighting tyranny or finding food, which do you think the population will do, right? More control. So Theodore Dalrymple explained, and this is a quote from him, and he said, in totalitarianism, shortages of material goods, even of necessities, were not a drawback but a great advantage to the rulers. These shortages were not accidental to the terror, but one of its most powerful instruments. Not only did shortages keep people's minds strictly on bread and sausage, and diverted their energies in producing them, or procuring them, so that there was no time or inclination left over for subversion, but the shortages meant that people could be brought to inform, spy, and betray each other very cheaply. Unquote. So what Theodore was talking about is that by creating these great shortages, right, what it gets our attention focused on feeding our families, which I get it, right? Instead of focusing on the cause. And this is a tool that they use. I would encourage you, though, to think of disobedience as more as a preventative freedom care. It alone is not the answer. Disobedience by the individual is nothing more than a nuisance to people in charge. If we are going to return our freedoms to the generations to come, it's going to require mass, civil, peaceful disobedience. And this mass civil disobedience will also require that we do it in a public manner. Civil disobedience will send a clear message that all the tyrants fear. And this message is that we, the people, no longer fear you. We are the many, and they are the few. And guys, I am not talking about protesting, which I would actually argue hurts the cause more than it helps, right? Because we protest and we ask for our freedoms back. We beg for our freedoms back, and the bureaucrats wave the banner of democracy and acclaim, see, freedom and democracy works. And then they return to their corrupt way of life. Civil disobedience is when we take our freedom back, but not by the sword, but by our actions of peaceful civil disobedience. Their rule rests on our consent. I want to repeat that. Their rule rests on our consent. See, but the real question is how, right? How do enough people find the courage to take a stand at the same time? Is it possible to get enough people awake? Is it too far along to stop? The truth is, I don't know. But I do know that the cost of doing nothings far exceed any one of us. Our future generations are depending upon you. In order to get more and more people practicing this peaceful civil disobedience, we must focus our attention locally. The regulations that are put down that are socially destructive have to be met with resistance inside every small community. See, we can use logic, we can use reason to make people aware of the propaganda and the hidden agendas. We can push our local educators to teach what totalitarianism is. We can arrange local get-togethers and community events in order to build more trust in this movement. We can build our own communities in order to elect like-minded, independent thinkers. And the more successful we are at uncovering the truth of the lies that surround us, at best, more people will stand up and practice peaceful, civil disobedience, but at its very worst will vote quietly for those willing to take a public stand. Sounds easy, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, as tyranny takes hold, fewer and fewer free thinkers exist. Instead, it's replaced by fear, confusion, and uncertainty. This mass psychosis is infectious. As totalitarianism takes hold, the easy answer is to comply. No more pain, no more fear, no more hardship will be the message of the elite. You will own nothing, and you will be happy. Right now, today, this is already a psychic epidemic. Through the application of time and pressure, our population is becoming immune to logic and reason. Our only hope is that the power of example rules the day. When people see others taking risks and taking chances on the principle of their own beliefs, these people will not be able to help themselves, but give some credibility to their position. And this credibility may not influence those who are already lost, but it might, just might, influence those who are on the fence. Without this leadership, no one will be willing to be the first to disobey. Some of you are already thinking, man, I'm not qualified or competent enough to stand up. What can I do? But see, guys, it's this exact mindset, right, is what has us here right now, today. Never forget that obedience is what's gotten us here. Are you compliant or complicit in the destruction of our liberty? I'd like to share a history story with you guys. And I don't know if you're familiar with the 30 tyrant story in Socrates. But now, this is not my writing, what I'm about to share with you guys. This is just clips from different places on the internet, Wikipedia even, to name a few, but just about history. I just wanted to share it with you because I think it teaches a really great lesson. So, Due to their desire to remain in control over Athens, and this was the 30 tyrants that I'm referring to, the 30 thought to exile or kill anyone who outwardly opposed their regime. Socrates remained in the city through this period, which actually caused the public to associate him with the 30, and actually may have contributed to his eventual death sentence. But anyway, Plato, in his Apology, said that Socrates recounted this incident in which the 30 once ordered him and 4 other men to bring before them Leon of Salamis. And this was a man that was known for his justice and upright character, but they were going to bring him in for execution. And while the other 4 men obeyed, Socrates refused, not wanting to partake in the guilt of the executioners. However, he did not attempt to warn or save Leon, but by disobeying, Socrates may have been placing his own life in jeopardy, right? And he claimed it was only the disbanding of the oligarchy soon after that saved his life. But anyway, so when the oligarchy came into power, the 30 commissioners, in their turn, they summoned Socrates and 4 others to this round chamber, and they instructed them to go fetch Leon, right, from his home, because he was to be executed. And this was, of course, only one of the many incidences in which they issued these instructions. Their object being to implicate as many other possible in their crimes. And I want to stress this part right here, guys, so I'm going to stop reading. But in which they issued instructions with their object being to implicate as many other people in their crimes. This happens every day to us. How many of the crimes of the powers that be do you participate in every single day? Right? Anyway, so on this occasion, however, I made it, so this is Socrates talking, I made it clear, not by my words, but by my actions, that the attention I paid to death was 0, but that I gave all my attention to avoid doing anything unjust or unholy. Powerful as it was, the government did not terrify me into doing a wrong action. When we came out of the rotunda, he said, the other 4 went to Salamis and arrested Leon. But I simply went home. Later on, in his 7th letter, Plato describes this interaction between the 30 and Socrates from his own point of view. And so Plato said, they tried to send a friend of mine, the aged Socrates, whom I should scarcely scruple to describe as the most upright man of the day, with some other persons to carry off one of the citizens by force to execution, in order that, whether he wished it or not, he might share guilt of their conduct. See, so what they do is they play this game and get you to play, a participant in the crime, and then now you're part of it, right? And you're a whole lot less to buck the system if you are now a participant in it, right? But anyway, but he goes on to say, but he would not obey them, risking all consequences in preference to becoming a partner in their iniquitous deeds. To create this movement of peaceful civil disobedience will require many people who still desire freedom of the wild over the safety of the zoo. With all the signs of tyranny, most people will still hide in confusion and fear. And when the leader comes knocking at your door, will you have wished you'd have stood sooner? Never forget that disobedience is what founded life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Paine, one of our founding fathers, once said, if there must be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace. And in this single reflection, well applied, is sufficient to awaken every man to duty. Boy, don't I wish it was so. I know that most of you have heard of the doomsday clock, right? This is this clock that they, bring on the news every now and then and, try to keep us in fear by. And they say, oh, we're, 2 minutes to midnight or a minute to midnight or, whatever it is. But if you're not familiar with the doomsday clock, look it up. But I found something interesting when I was researching this. So a lady named Mary Robinson, who's the former president of Ireland and the one-time United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, she said during a news conference that, and this is important, no one country can tackle them on their own, no matter how large their population, how strong their economy, or how feared their military. This is an interesting statement to me because if you know anything about the history of the doomsday clock, I think it was built in like 1947, but it really came, to its own under the fear of nuclear war, and yet she's proclaiming it doesn't matter how big your military is, that you just won't be able to do it. And so I think this is an interesting statement. I think I would argue that this is them with all of their ego, warning us that it is almost checkmate. I think they're telling us, right, that the tyranny and the corruption and all of this stuff has taken such a foothold that there isn't much time. I think they're telling us that we are too stupid to understand the complex game that's being played right before our eyes. I often wonder what future generations will say about this time. What will your kids, your grandkids, and your great-grandkids say about you? What will they say about me? Well, I guess at the end of the day.